The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Set Boundaries and Achieve Work-Life Balance, offered by the Oregon State University Alumni Association in partnership with Oregon State's Professional and Continuing Education Unit. I'm Greg Aronoff, the Marketing and Communications Manager here with PACE, and I'm joined by Yuliya Dennis, who is from the Alumni Association, and we also have Bruce Hohensee, who is the President of Talent Driven Consulting. So welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So before we get started, I'm going to share the agenda for today. Like I said, I work for Professional and Continuing Ed, which is the non-credit arm of the university. We partner with colleges across campus to offer open enrollment classes to the public on subjects ranging from professional development to gardening to beer making. And we're always excited to continue our partnership with Yuliya Dennis from the Alumni Association. And I'm sure some of you have joined us for our other webinars on the career series, so we're excited to have Yuliya and Bruce here today. And without further ado, I am going to hand it off.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's always great to partner with you on these webinars, and it's exciting to bring our wonderful volunteers and speakers to share very valuable information with our alumni and OSU community. So thanks everyone also for being here, and we're excited to present on this topic. So I'm Yuliya Dennis. I'm the director for our alumni career services programs at the OSU Alumni Association. I really love what I do. I love working with our alumni to support all kinds of career goals, including things that are about outside of work and how do you balance out your life so that your life is really more aligned with the kind of life you envisioned for yourself. And we're wrapping up this year's career series, and so we'll be back up in the fall. And I'm excited to have Bruce here with me and present on this topic. So just as a general reminder, please feel free to ask questions during the webinar via our chat box. We're also going to record this webinar and you'll get a link emailed to you afterwards. And you can go ahead and put your questions in the chat box at any time, and we're always glad to answer those. And Greg's going to help moderate that for us. And I'm also going to share a little bit about our career services. So we do provide all of our alumni with career services and career programs. If you have any kind of career goal, whether it be like how do you balance your time, or if you want to switch gears altogether, or maybe something Bruce shares inspires you and you decide to want to make some kind of a change in your life, reach out to me. We provide resume reviews, career consultations, events such as this one, webinars. We do in-person events and all kinds of other programs throughout the Alumni Association that really are geared to help you connect with other people and learn more about the kind of opportunities that are out there in our network. So do reach out to me, and I'm always glad to help people out. So I'm going to provide also a brief overview of the things that we're covering in the webinar. So we're going to look at some different approaches to having better work-life balance, and we're going to hear from the perspective of, in this case, going to be two professionals. So we were going to have Catherine Erickson present with us, but unfortunately she had jury duty and she's unable to attend with us today. But you will get to hear from myself and also from Bruce about various things that we've done in order to work on creating a sustaining work-life balance. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you Bruce. I'm so excited to have Bruce attend this webinar. He has been volunteering with our programs for a number of years now, and I'm really excited for him to present on this topic. He's one of our alumni career ambassadors, and he's definitely just a very engaged person who has just so much knowledge to share with alumni and our community. So I'm going to have Bruce introduce himself, and then we'll go forward and present on the topic with you.
Thank you, Yuliya. My name is Bruce Hohensee. I am the president and principal recruiter for Talent Driven Consulting. And I am involved in a number of ways on campus in the College of Business, College of Engineering, here at the Alumni Center. So it's kind of fun to be engaged and keep in touch with the active Oregon State campus activities and everything that's going on. Talent Driven Consulting is my company. We help small to medium-sized companies to be able to find the needs that they have. We help them. We focus more on quality of hire than than just getting things done. And we've got some fun results that we've been able to share with our clients and our customers.
So we're going to actually have a couple poll questions that Greg's going to lead the way in asking. And so Greg's going to post those up on the screen and go ahead and put your responses in. So our first poll question is, what are you looking to accomplish with having a better work-life balance? And we are also, so go ahead and put that in. Then we're also, we're unable to do open-ended answers, but if you have another response that you'd like to add into the poll, go ahead and type that into the comments.
All right, so we are collecting the responses, and right now, make life manageable is the clear winner, followed by free time for other pursuits.
That's great, thank you. And we do have another poll question as well, so we're gonna do the second one, which is really focused on what are some barriers that you're experiencing to feeling more balanced. And so Greg's gonna post that up as well, and go ahead and put your responses in.
All right, as the answers come in, they are across the board right now. The winner is too many competing priorities, followed by hectic work schedule. So we'll let it run for a little bit more, but it seems like that's how it's going to be.
That's great. Thanks everyone for doing that, and that's definitely in line with a lot of what we'll talk about today. And actually, this is a great time for the next section, which is Bruce's career transitions, and his story, I think, really illustrates a lot of the points that we're going to cover later today. So I'm excited for Bruce to share about his career.
Yeah, I resonate with some of those points, and we're going to talk about several of those. To set the stage, though, I'm gonna walk back a little bit in my career and just tell you a little bit and a crossroads that I came to and decisions that I made that have shaped the future. I started my career with a company that sold chemicals to the paper industry, and I spent 17 years with them. I had worked my way up into corporate accounts. I had been the national recruiter for the company. And through some transitions, we got bought and some things changed. I found myself in a role that was traveling, and I was covering a very large territory. I was being very successful. In fact, the year before I left, I received a sales award, and it was essentially the top salesperson in the whole company. But in that process, I realized that the rewards I was receiving, which were good, didn't really take the place of the time I was giving up. And specifically, when I was home for a couple of weeks at Christmas time, and I had small kids, and I was just realizing how much I was missing by being gone 3 to 5 days every week. And I decided that that wasn't what I wanted the future of my life to look like. So I approached my boss, and I basically said, in the next 6 months, I'd like to figure out a different work process or a different structure or a different position so that this can be different. And unfortunately, because of the space I was covering and the things that I was doing, nothing really changed. I did have an opportunity to take a role that was going to keep me home every night. It didn't necessarily seem like the perfect fit, but it was accomplishing that mission. So I decided to leave, which was a hard thing to do. A 17-year career. I had never thought I would work for somebody different when I started there. And so it was hard to make that transition. But I took a role that was local, had me home every night. It wasn't exactly the fit that I thought it would be. And I was approached by one of my clients to become the first sales manager that company had ever had. They'd been around for 40 years, but the sales group had always reported to the CEO. And so they were in the process of kind of putting middle management in. So I stepped into that space, again, kind of assuming that this was going to be the place I would retire from. And after about a year, determined that also wasn't quite the place I wanted to be at, and was, I guess, granted or given the opportunity to spend a little bit of time thinking about what I really wanted to do. And the idea of being in recruiting was strong. I had thought previously about maybe kind of venturing out on my own and doing something, but I wasn't, I never would have left the security of the corporate world to do that on my own if I hadn't kind of had a couple of transition points and gained some confidence in different areas and kind of realized that I really had very little to lose by trying to do something different. I knew it would be hard. I expected that. And for the last 5 years, I've been doing this, and I would say the first 2 years were bumpy. There was things that I did right, and there was things that I did wrong. But it did allow me a great degree of flexibility. I was able to coach my kids' sports. I was home most of the time. I did travel a little bit for certain clients, but I had a lot more freedom of schedule, which is part of what mattered to me, as well as proximity, being home versus on an airplane.
Yeah.
Did you have a certain date of when you would go back to a safe job, or was there a safety net, or what were your thinking around that?
So I had the privilege of a couple of things. I have a wife who is very frugal and was able to tighten the belt and keep us on track without departures. We had a certain amount of I guess, nest egg or working capital, and we kind of operated on the sense of, well, we have this amount in reserve, and if we get to this balance, then I'll leave and go try to find a different job, even if that means I've got to travel again or do something different. Thankfully, we never quite got there. We dipped pretty close to it a couple of times, and it took. There were certainly times where I doubted if it would work, but I'm very pleased that it has. When we talk about the work-life balance, one of the things that can look different for everybody, what their idea of what that looks like. In some people's mind, that's freedom to be able to do what they want to do. In other cases, it's living where they want to live. It's time. It's, if somebody's working 60, 80 hours a week, work-life balance might be 50 hours a week and just, being relevant or something. So there's a lot of different views of that. For me, part of that was freedom of schedule. We have a family house in Sun River, and the ability in the summertime to go over there and work from there. And I can get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I can go work for 4 or 5 hours, and by the time I come back for lunch, everybody else is just kind of waking up, and the plan for the day has been established, and I can participate and join and go. And I have that freedom that I wouldn't have had in a different type of role.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I think one of the things that really draws me to your story is that you have experience in making a whole bunch of different kinds of transitions and working in a sort of a standard office job, and then a travel job, and then doing your own thing as well. And I think that perspective, and then having kids to that perspective, I think is going to be really great to continue to share as we talk through the webinar. So for the first sort of tip that we have to share with you, and Bruce definitely touched on this as he was talking about what really ultimately made him decide to do things differently, is identifying what you value. And so whenever we start anything, whether it be a life change or even just like thinking through something that we're wanting to do, identifying your values, I think, is always the best place to start. A question that you can use to ask yourself to figure out what do you value most is to say, if you were to say like 3 to 5 things that matter to you the most, like what would those be? And if you had to let go of everything else, so like for a lot of people, maybe family, or for some people it's like maybe it's having balance with by having like free time to do exercising or whatever it is. Like for different people, what those top things are might change. But looking at that, I think as a starting point is a good practice. And I like to think of the rocks analogy. I don't know if any of you have seen there's a couple of videos that show these rock exercises that I think illuminate this point really well. So if you start if you take a jar and if you start with the little things, so that would be, I think of them as like, the emails and all the things, all the various things that we're always negotiating every single day and navigating. If you start with all the little things and fill up your jar with all the little things, and when you try to fit something big, like maybe time with your family or time with your friends or something else that maybe isn't but maybe it's not like on your daily to-do list, it just is something that is important to you, but you try to just stuff it in, it doesn't fit. However, if you put those big rocks first, so you take the things that you value the most, you schedule those in, you put those in first, and then you fill in the little things, all of a sudden there's lots more room for all these other small things. And that's what we're going to be advocating for in this webinar. The other question you can ask to reflect on what matters to you is, if you were to do the same thing you're doing now, what would your life look like 5, 10, 15 years from now? Would it be a life you want to live and align with what you find the most meaningful? And Bruce's example is perfect for that, because he spent those weeks around Christmas time, looked at his life and said, yeah, this isn't what I'd want for the next 5, 10, 15 years, and then made transitions based on that. So I think that was a perfect point for that. So we do have, I believe there's a poll question next. There's a new slide and a new, yep. So we have a poll question next. And the poll question is going to be on, have you written or defined your value statement for yourself in the last year? So I'm very curious about this, and I'd love to know if some of you have done that. So go ahead and respond, and then Greg's going to keep track of the responses.
All right, as the responses come in, it looks like no is the clear answer with the nearly 75%.
So maybe this is something that you can even think through as we're talking in the webinar. It's like, what are your top values? What do you value the most? And then aligning your goals and the rest of the things we talk about in the webinar with those things, I think will make a very big impact in your life. And then next, we're going to talk about establishing boundaries. And this little graph that you see on the slide, so actually something that Bruce introduced me to, and I have used this almost on a daily basis, and it has significantly impacted my ability to do what I think is actually truly urgent and important. So I'm really excited for Bruce to also share this information with you as well.
Yeah, and I can't take too much credit for this. I had a mentor who shared this with me, and I'm sure somebody had created it long before them. But it's a fairly simple concept. In life, in work, in just your daily life, you're going to have a myriad of tasks, and they're going to fit into one of 4 quadrants. So from at the bottom, you'd have something that's low urgency and low importance, meaning maybe it's some of the emails. Maybe those are urgent. It just depends on your perspective. But something that doesn't have a whole lot of urgency and not a lot of importance in it. Then you'll have things that are more important, but they're not urgent. You got to do it. You got to paint the house at some point. It's important, but it's not the top thing on your list to do. Then you'll have things that are very urgent but not important. Again, that's probably the emails. And at the top quadrant, you have things that are really important and urgent. It's not very hard to do the things that are important and urgent. Returning the phone call to the client, those things are important, they're urgent, you're going to do those things pretty easily. You'll fit them in. The challenge is working in the things that are important but not urgent. Those are the things that go by the wayside. In the management realm, that's the planning, that's the strategy pieces. And if you don't build time into your calendar to do those things, they may not get done. The other challenge is figuring out which of these things, if they're not urgent and they're not important, should you even be doing them at all? And eliminating some of those from your list or delegating those to other people. So there's different aspects and ways in which you can use this, whether you're looking at a project, you're looking at tasks, you're looking at your day, just scheduling your day. You can apply this in a lot of different ways. And when we talk about scheduling, if we go to the next slide, one of the things that I have used, is there a poll question?
Oh, we do have.
I'm sorry, my bad.
No, we do have a poll question actually. The poll question is how do you schedule your time? So before Bruce talks more about the ways that he has worked on scheduling, which he has a lot of experience in creating really strong, effective systems. We're curious about what you do. And if there's something, if you use another method, feel free to just drop it into the comment section and we'll be able to see that as well.
Okay, as the responses come in, it looks like both the paper and online calendar is the winner, and then Outlook calendar is falling somewhere behind that in the second space.
Great, thank you everyone for responding. It's funny, so I used to keep both the paper and online, but then I was having a hard time as I was scheduling more with other people, keeping in paper, so that I had to move entirely online. Oh, we had some.
We do have a question. How much time do you spend prioritizing and scheduling per day?
Well, that's a good question. I spend probably a good 15, 20 minutes scheduling usually a day. Bruce, how about you?
Yeah, I would say I probably take about 15 or 20 minutes at the beginning of the day and kind of look at my day and what needs to happen, and then I would like to say at the end of my day, but when we're talking about work-life balance, one of the things that happens in our family is I will work until probably about 4:30 to 5 o'clock on most days. And our kids are out of school now, so it's a little bit different. But when they were in school, from about 5 o'clock until about 8 or 9, I tried not to do a lot of work. I tried to have that as family time, do other things. And so a lot of times it would be after 9 o'clock, I would go back and I would look at the next day and some things. So I guess when you combine those two, I probably spend about a half hour a day looking at schedule and planning and prioritizing what's going to happen. And I do run my day by my calendar. And so when we talk about the boundaries and the big rocks and the things, if I've got a project and I know I need 2 hours of time to do something, let's say I'm doing a search for a specific role and I know that I need a certain amount of time to be in that space and not be distracted, I will look out on my calendar and I'll just block either 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 time periods so that I can designate to that. And then that way, when I come to those times, that's the plan. I can get that job done and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here too, because I actually, as you say that, I do pretty much exactly the same thing. So I probably do also spend probably closer to 30 minutes a day scheduling, because it's in the beginning of the day and then also at the end of the day as well. And then also I do the same thing where I schedule out my work time. So if I have a project, I essentially schedule a meeting with my own self, and I usually give myself at least 30 minutes more than what I need, because I find that things always happen that keep me from really working on that project for that whole time. And so I do the same thing and prioritize my day that way.
When you work for yourself, do you find you work late into the night, or do you give yourself a certain cap that you won't work past that, or like how do you fit that in?
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I have used or done is I will set hours that I try to hold to. And as much, the funny thing about that is it's more hours that I won't work. There's certain hours that I know that I'm not available, and then depending on demand, I'll fill in with the rest. And I can't say that every day goes perfectly. There's some days at the end of the day you have more to do than you had time during the day, and so it might take you later at night. One of the things I try to do, I don't know that I do it perfectly, I try to close my computer down every day. So all of those files and all of those things that I've opened up in the course of the day, and the thoughts that didn't quite get finished because I was moved on to something else or got interrupted, I'm trying to close those out. And if one of those things requires, say, a half hour of time, but it's 10:30 at night and I don't really want to do it at 10:30 at night, then I'll put that on my calendar for either the next day or whenever I need to do it, so that it still gets done. But that's part of the planning process that I use in trying to make sure I have space. And then I will build in some buffer space. to try to get that stuff that just comes up. Another aspect that we in developing work-life balance is figuring out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And there's certain aspects of your life that you probably shouldn't be doing. It'll take you longer, it'll cause you more stress, the product won't be as good. And by utilizing a different resource, you can accomplish that very well. We were just talking before the webinar started. I use people through Upworks, which is a virtual reality kind of marketplace for people to do things. So I'm not a creative. If I want to put together a graphical depiction of something, I can block it out in my engineering mind, but it's not going to translate very well. So I just have recently used somebody for a project, and I was telling Yuliya about it, where I sent it off, and about 2 or 3 days later, I'll have 3 or 4 options that will come into my inbox. Most of them will be something completely different than I would have ever come up with, but one of them will likely be like, that's it, that's what I want. I'm not spending that energy, I'm not spending that time. It cost me a little bit of money, but it's well worth it to have that done. Another thing that is on the screen there is batching, and I think Tim Ferriss is the one who introduced me to this idea. But instead of like having your email open and answering it all day long, set certain times. Maybe first thing in the morning, maybe right before lunch, maybe at 3:30 in the afternoon. Those are your times when you open up, you look at your email, you spend half an hour, you answer the questions that are most critical. You plan time if you have something you have to research to get back to somebody. But aside from that, you stay focused on your other work throughout those times. So batching different aspects. For me, the creative aspect. So if I've got a new job and I've got to write the job description, and I want to write that in a way that's really going to appeal to the right person and maybe turn off the wrong person, that takes energy and time. And I need to be free of distraction for that. So when I do those activities matters. Now that's an activity I can do in the evening when the house is quieted down a little bit and there's not other demands. So that's a good time for me. I don't mind doing that. Other people would choose a different way of doing it. And then I think a large number of us in the whole idea of balance is the relationships that we have. Most of the time, that's probably family, but it could be friends, it could be other things, and looking for how you want to spend that time. Again, I have some flexibility because of the type of work that I do, where if my wife is doing the Harvest Carnival at our kids' school on a certain Friday, I can just block my day. I don't have to ask for vacation. I can just go and invest and be there. And so it's nice to have that kind of flexibility. And certainly there's other ways that whether it's a coffee date or just a regular lunch date with a friend, that you just get on your schedule, you make it a priority, one of the values that you have, and make it happen.
Yep, and actually, it's this next thing about routines and automation. I've actually I've determined, so my family is important to me, my extended family is important to me, and I've decided that there's a certain optimum time for seeing family for me that works well for me, and especially contacting my parents. And so I have it in my calendar for when it's best to call my parents. And also we've done this thing where we do family lunches the first Saturday of every month. And so everybody knows this is when it happens and it's on our calendars. So just making it routine so I don't have to be when am I seeing my family again? And having it be something that's important but not urgent, so it never happens. But I love the topic of routines and automations. And having read a lot of professional books and having been coached myself and having provided coaching to other people, I think if you look at your values and then through the things that Bruce has talked about, if you're able to set up really good routines, that will probably enhance your life in a way that really few things will enhance your life. A few examples of that. I determined that like working out at least a couple times a week is really important to me. So it helps me manage my stress. It helps me feel just a lot more energetic. And so what I've done is I have 3 different classes that I sign up for. I usually only make it to 2 or 1, but I sign up for 3 because I know that something might happen and will maybe like a work thing or a meeting or something else gets in the way. But I schedule it so that it's in my calendar and it's social. So I do like to take classes and I like to be with other people when I exercise, and I work a lot harder when I'm with other people than by myself. So knowing these things about myself, knowing that it matters to me, I just set up this routine. But you can look at every single thing that you value and then figure out, okay, can I make this a routine? Can I make this automated? Another thing that I've made into a routine is spending time with my husband. So Wednesday night is our weekly date night. We know it's there. We don't always plan ahead for in terms of like exactly knowing what we're going to do. In fact, my husband is the opposite of me, and so he enjoys being very spontaneous, whereas I'm like a really big planner. And so we won't really know generally like what we're going to do, but we know Wednesday is our night. We do something, and it's in the calendar, so I don't have to worry about like, oh, when am I gonna hang out? When do we get time just to ourselves? And really, with almost everything, you can create a routine around it. Another thing that Bruce and I talked about when we talked about this webinar is things like, if you're a runner, just putting out your shoes right by your bed or somewhere visible, or like I set out my clothes the night before, and then I always also pack my lunch the night before. Like as I'm doing dinner, I just alongside of it will just put things together for lunch, because then I know, okay, I'm going to get a very well balanced meal for lunch that is in alignment with the kind of things that I want to eat, like vegetables and fruit and all these other things that I think are healthy and that I want to have more of. And then the little graphic shows more things like, you can do like, when you wake up, or like all sorts of things can be added to your routine. And I think, Bruce, you've talked as well about like some of your morning routines that you've done. So I'd love for you to share some of that with the group.
Yeah. So one of the things that's important for me is whether you pray or meditate or just kind of getting your mind straight. And I've found that the morning for me is the best time to do that. The kids aren't up, the hecticness of the day hasn't started, interruptions aren't there, and I really like that quiet in the morning. So on a night or a day like today, where it's warm out and sunny out, opening up the windows, feeling that breeze come through the house, and having some quiet space. In the wintertime, getting the fire going and snuggling around the fire as I have my quiet time is kind of a fun thing. And so I kind of look forward to that. Every now and then sleep does ring a little bit louder, but I feel like if I don't start my day off that way, it doesn't usually go as well. And so that's a routine that I have established that serves well for me. In the evening, I praying with the kids and just having that time. It doesn't always look the same, and sometimes you don't hit the mark that you set for yourself. But it's part of, I guess, the ritual of the day that just kind of makes things normal. And I mean, what they're learning about brain science and everything is your brain is constantly trying to make things easier. So as you have routines and as you do things on a regular basis, it knows what to expect. It's not uncommon. It doesn't have to think as hard. It doesn't burn as much calories. So you're helping yourself out in that process. But every now and then, it's going to be spontaneous and push yourself out of that routine space as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I loved what you just said about a brain space and making time for that. So part of our online career book club right now, we're reading a book called Originals, and it's about like being creative and being an original thinker. And one of the sections that I read recently from that book is how a lot of people who are actually very creative, some aspects of their life are not as creative. Like they might wear just very similar clothing all the time, or they might just have certain things that they're always doing, so they don't have to think about those things, and it doesn't have to take up space in their brain, so they can focus on these other things that are more interesting. And so I think routines do that for us. They allow us to be true to our values and to what matters to us, while giving us space to focus on some other new interesting things. And so I think it's such a great thing to consider, I think. Do we have a question?
We do. Will you discuss keeping life from taking over work? How do you achieve that balance?
Yeah. Yep. That's a really good one. Bruce, do you want to talk about some of that initially?
So the first thing that comes to mind in that is, I remember being at a time, this was in my corporate role, where I was frustrated because there was too many priorities and I couldn't get to all of them. And I think it was the same mentor who showed me the box of the urgent and the important, said to me that sometimes it's more important what you choose not to do than what you choose to do. Everybody has the same amount of time. You have lots of things to do. There are certain ones that have to be done. There are certain ones that can be delegated. There are certain ones that you just need to decide to kill. And there are certain ones that you know what, it didn't get done, and that's just the way it is. Every role is different. I'm not going to tell a surgeon that they need to skip a step because they just ran out of time. That's not going to happen. Certain roles you have to do everything. But when you're talking about trying to manage your life, you have to figure out, and I think it goes back, if we go to the summary slide, I think it starts with identifying those values. What are the most important things? In one of the roles that I had, I was managing a team, and it was important for me to have time with my family. So I left the office between about 5 and 5:30 just about every day. And so that put me home so that I had the evening to be with my family and do things. Didn't mean that I didn't have emails to still answer and other things to still do, but at least I was home and I was doing it there, and I was involved in their lives, and most of that work happened again after they would go to bed. I had a colleague, he shared an office across from me. He routinely stayed there until 7 or 8 o'clock at night and then complained about not having time with his family. So his value was getting all the work done. My value was having the time with family. I think we both did good jobs, but I guess I'm speaking on his behalf, I think he found it less rewarding because of the way he prioritized. I'm not saying he was right. I'm not saying I was right. I'm just saying that that's part of it. And so you have to identify and understand. If you don't understand where those values are, and some of them come intrinsically and you don't hardly think about them, you just know them. And other ones, I think it does take a little bit of introspection to determine what those could be.
Do you have thoughts on productivity? So do you like to start your day with easy wins and doing little tasks, or sort of the Brian Tracy eat the frog and start with like the hardest things so you get it out of the way?
For me personally, there is an element of those difficult things. I've got to kind of get them out of the way, and the other things will kind of come into place. I would say not every day works out that way, but I put it on my calendar. So in my calendar, I get those big things on there. And then if I don't have the bandwidth or the time when that time on my calendar comes, I give myself the ability to move it. So if you say it's Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock and I'm supposed to be doing a certain activity, but I've just had something else happen and now it doesn't feel like the right priority, I might move that to Wednesday at 2 or some other time when I'm in the right mind space to do that. And there's certain activities you're supposed to kind of do in the morning, and certain ones you're supposed to do at other times. And so understanding your own kind of rhythm and when your mental space is greatest for creative activities and other things is something that is not the same for everybody. And so you have to kind of know that about yourself.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think that. So when I do something very similar to Bruce, like moving things around, so I think it also comes down to having really strong boundaries. So I think I'm one of the reasons I'm very motivated by this work-life balance topic is that growing up, my father, I would definitely define him as someone who had like workaholic tendencies, worked all the time, like 16-hour days very regularly. And I didn't get to see him very often. And it was challenging growing up in that scenario, and knowing that like I tend to be like wanting to just do everything all at once, and like I could see myself, especially in my current role, if I didn't set those boundaries, and if I didn't articulate very clearly at what point I would start and end things, I could see myself just completely being swallowed up by everything, because I am passionate about my work. I do really care about it. And but then having seen my dad do this, what I do is I set really clear boundaries that I write them down. And they're in my calendar, so I know when I'm gonna take a break. I know when I'm gonna end the day. And I do the same thing like Bruce, moving things around, giving myself time. And then I do sort of follow the eat the frog, especially if I notice that it's very likely I'll procrastinate on something. I will do that first. That's gonna be, but I do the same thing. I block time in my calendar. I put those things in, and those boundaries too. I work with so many people who are afraid to say no, especially around work. And it's so, if you're able to work through why you say yes to things. I had a mentor, I was struggling, I was feeling, this was multiple jobs in the past, but I was struggling, feeling just completely overwhelmed by work. And she said to me, well, why do you feel like you have to say yes to everything? And then that really set me to explore that I was finding value in being the go-getter and being the person that people turn to, but that meant I was doing way too much. I literally didn't say no to anything. And then once I realized that I was finding my meaning and my identity in being a yes person, I was like, well, this can't be sustainable. This can't be healthy. And those boundaries really helped. So that's a really great question, really great point. Do we have more questions?
And I will just add that where you find yourself distracted. So especially it's really convenient when you work in a home office to find all of those little things you need to do. Oh, I need to go, water this plant, or when you find yourself doing those activities instead of work, probably whatever it is you need to do next is something you don't want to do. And so you either need to just buckle down and say, okay, let's get this out of the way because it's really hurting my productivity, and get it done. Or you need to look at it and say, is this something I shouldn't be doing? And is there a mechanism by which I can solve this problem in a different way? In which case you're freeing yourself up mentally for activities and work that you more enjoy doing. I will just say, not everybody's going to have the opportunity to take a job at home or do something just that they want to do. Work is work, and you have to balance that out and do things. But I think there's ways of approaching that work, setting those boundaries, establishing what your routines are going to be that can help you be successful in that. I know in traveling with other colleagues, there were certain ones who were very routine about getting up in the morning, starting the day with exercise and different things. Didn't matter where they were, that was still their routine and part of their life, and that helped keep them in balance in spite of the high stress travel type of role. Maybe if when I had started that travel role in the first place, if I had established a pattern of I was only going to be gone this many days a week, or I was only going to travel every other week, or some process, if I had set something like that, maybe I wouldn't have gotten to the place where, in spite of my success, I was so frustrated that I was ready to walk away. I don't know, because I didn't do that at that time. At the time, it was, I didn't approach it with that much forethought, I guess. I just kind of let things happen, and pretty soon it started to absorb everything, which was, I finally was able to recognize that was not the path I wanted to be on.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Do we have another question?
We do. Do you want to talk about any favorite books that you have? So you talked about Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week, the originals, maybe using Upwork. So either books or tools or podcasts or things that you listen to that you found valuable.
I think mine, there's so many, so I'm constantly reading through things. There was one that was, I can't remember now. There was one that was really good, and I may have to just pull my list and then send them to you, Greg, and then have it be emailed out. But there was one, Essentialism, actually, I think is the name, but it's like narrowing things down. And I always find that what's really healthy, at least for me, and I can't speak for everyone, but at least for me, is every once in a while to just throw out there, like on a sheet of paper, or sometimes my husband and I have done this with like sticky notes, like everything you have to do that's like a big thing, and then figuring out what can you remove, what actually needs to happen. But the process of removal, so the saying no to things, the decreasing, is a very healthy vibe. So essentialism is one I would recommend.
Okay.
Bruce, how about you?
Yeah, well, I guess the thought I had right there was more around time management of of listening to podcasts or books. I like to put those on when I'm running or when I'm driving. So it's time that I otherwise, wouldn't necessarily be mentally productive, but that's when I can consume new material. There are a ton of books out there. I think where I most recently have gotten a lot more of my input has been, I was part of a group called EntreLeadership, and we would meet regularly, and we had content that we would consume as well as an accountability. And again, that was part of business leaders kind of getting together and making it intentional. And there's all kinds of different clubs and resources for that, and it just kind of depends on what space you're in and what you're trying to find. I don't know that I have a list of books to say you got to go read all, and that just sounds like a to-do list, and I feel like that's against what we're supposed to be doing today.
Well, and it's funny because I'll share my side on that point, because so whenever I do my values evaluation, reading and learning new things always is one of the top, and so it is part of my routine to read new things, and not listening, but actually like physically reading. I like to look at the words on the page, and I like to read physical books. So I've done the route of non-physical books, and it doesn't work for me. So it's one of my top values. It's one of those big rocks. So it's so different for everyone. But I think that's what makes it cool, is that you can pick and choose what really works well for you.
I will listen to Audible and podcasts at like double speed. Just to
That's awesome.
I usually do it at 1.5, but doubles a little too fast.
Yeah.
And we have another question. Do any of you use the uncalendar, in quotes?
I have not.
I've not done that. I will say that one of the best things I've done now, keep in mind that my job is to basically talk to people all day long. And I probably about 6 months ago began using Calendly to schedule those. And that has freed up a ton of time for me. Instead of shooting 2 or 3 emails or messages back and forth to try to arrange a time that works for both of us, setting up the Calendly app so that people can schedule time on my calendar has eliminated all of that, and that has made things like, there's other tools like Slack and other things that you can, when you're working with a team, that you can use that will help productivity. There's so many apps out there. There's probably 10 variations of anything we've just said that will do something similar or the right one. So you just have to figure out which one works for you. I'm not a big Google Sheets type guy. I would rather have the actual like Excel file and work on it that way. So in some cases, some of the tools work really well, and in some cases, you just got to figure out what suits your needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I use Google Calendar a lot. That's my go-to for personal.
And I use Google Calendar too, and I've got it tied in with my phone so that everything talks to each other. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how iPhone and Macs and all those things, how it all works. I'm just glad it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another thing too I wanted to share is that I keep my personal and work calendars completely separate, unless I'm like going out of town and I need my husband to know that I'm going to be out of town for work. And it's during a time when he would expect me not to be at work. But otherwise, I keep separate calendars, because in my mind, I want there to be a separation. So no email when it's non-work time. no work calendar when it's not work time, and vice versa. So at work, I want to be completely focused on the things that matter for my job, and it's not, yeah. And so I don't have my personal stuff that like shows up and reminds. I don't have my personal calendar stuff remind me of things at work. So I keep them separate, and that helps me have really good boundaries around being present in those moments and being focused.
Well, I think being present is a big part of what we miss, and I think that's, you've all seen the parent who's at the ball game and they're on their phone or on their email, and they're there, but they're not really there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think getting to the place, I think that's maybe a good definition for balance, is getting to the
Yeah,
place where you
that's
can
beautiful.
be present in what it is you're doing, whether that's at work or at home or whatever is the task at hand at the moment.
Yep, I love that. That's a good summary.
We do have another question. Any success stories with people who telecommute?
Yeah, well, our last webinar was actually Lydia, who's also one of our alumni career ambassadors, and she did a webinar on telecommuting. I'll make sure to send that out with the email, or we can send that out with the email. But yeah, it's telecommuting, all kinds of interesting different challenges, and there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions around it, and Lydia breaks it down really well. So I encourage you to watch that webinar for some really good content on telecommuting and setting boundaries around telecommuting.
Well, I think I've worked, even though I've worked in corporate roles, I've worked from a home office for 20 years. And setting those boundaries is a critical part of being productive. Otherwise, it's so easy to allow distractions to get in the way. And it goes both ways. You can rob from work time, or you can let work rob from family time. And so it is going both ways.
Yeah, good point. All right, I think we can finish up our summary. I think we already pretty much talked about everything here in just our exchange. Bruce, any other gem takeaways?
I think the concept of setting out with the end in mind, so knowing what you want it to look like, will help you accomplish it. So defining those values, setting those boundaries, getting those things in place, figuring out the tools like the calendar or whatever that you're going to use, and then the likelihood that you're going to end up where you want to be is a lot greater.
Yep, I agree with that. All right. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for sharing and being part of this webinar. And I always enjoy working with you. For some next steps, do please consider joining our LinkedIn group. It's our Beaver Careers LinkedIn group that is open to all OSU alumni, staff, or students. And then you can message me one takeaway from the webinar, and you'll be entered to win a free career consultation with me. So be sure to do that. If you want to just talk through some of these things, I'd be happy to help coach you on figuring out what will work best for you. And then for follow-up, definitely reach out to me. I love talking about anything career related. It doesn't have to be about job searching or career change or anything like that. It can be about how to be successful in what you're doing now, or how to just figure out what your values are, etc. I have a really great worksheet that I'll send a link to Greg that he can send it to you. But there's just a lot of resources out there that will help you, and I'd be glad to work with you on any of your goals that you might have.
All right, thank you so much, Yuliya and Bruce. That was great. And I did want to provide some information to our audience. I talked a little bit about professional and continuing education here at OSU. And the reason we like to partner with the Alumni Association and hear from our alumni is because we're often able to connect with the very widespread OSU network throughout not only the state of Oregon, but the US and beyond. And we can help provide educational opportunities for personal enrichment and professional development. Each program we offer is designed for working professionals with convenient online classes and year-round start dates. We also offer customizable team training. Again, I would like to thank Yuliya and Bruce. We really appreciate having you here. And this was great. You guys delivered a ton of great content. And with that, I will wrap it up. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Greg.